Henrik Franklin, International Fund for Agriculture Development. What are the biggest challenges for farmers in rural areas in Eastern Africa?
Farmers in Eastern Africa, the majority are smallholder farmers, often having less than 1 hectare. And despite that, all these smallholder farmers are the ones that produce most of the food. They're also among the most food insecure and also suffering from chronic malnutrition. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. But the problem is that a lot of them don't have the access to technology, to land, to finance. So oftentimes they can barely produce enough food for themselves and their families, but if they can get better access to these kind of services, they will be able to produce not only for themselves, but also have a surplus for the market and access a lot of opportunities. And talking about market opportunities, they also need infrastructure like roads, markets, and also knowledge of how to adapt to a changing climate.
How do EU agricultural policies affect these farmers?
Well, farmers, as I said, they have interest to access the markets, and the European Union market is one of them. Of course, at least in the past, there's been a lot of subsidies, so sometimes it's hard to compete to these markets for the smallholder farmers. But I believe not to reduce the importance of that market, but I think for a lot of these farmers now, with Africa sort of developing quite rapidly, there's a huge demand for food. Globally, it's expected that by 2050 there will be a 60% increase in demand for food, and only in Africa the increase of the food and beverage market is going from 300 billion to about $1 trillion by 2030. So this is a huge opportunity, but one key thing for the farmers is to have the quality standards so that they can sell to whether it's a supermarket in Nairobi or in Stockholm. And with the EU, we're working very close. For example, we've recently launched the Agribusiness Capital Fund, which is a new fund focusing on what I mentioned before, access to finance. So it invests in the missing middle, which is those smallholder farmers that are too big to have microfinance, but too small to get access to commercial banking.
And how can you ensure that investments benefit both the farmers and the climate?
I think for African farmers, the big issue is primarily adaptation to climate change. More floods, more droughts. So having access to drought-tolerant seeds, to irrigation systems. 95% of farming in Africa is rain-fed, so there's a huge need for irrigation. But even in Africa and in other developing countries, there can of course be contributions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through mitigation. So increasing productivity, producing more in less land helps to reduce encroachment on natural environments, and also providing, for example, fuel-efficient stoves reduces the encroachment on forests, for example.
Thank you very much.